From Your World Discovered, my name is David Ewen, and on E.P.N, my guest today is John Monz, who is a math teacher and track coach in Weston, Massachusetts. Years ago, when I was in high school, he was the assistant coach. And very recently, after a few decades, we have reconnected, and I spoke with him a few weeks ago. And we'll be talking today about youth. And we'll be discussing how the youth has changed from the late 1970s up to today. First, let's welcome John to the program.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be here.
Now, we had talked prior to going on air about your career. It started as a track coach in Weston, Massachusetts. And at that time, you did not know that you would have a long career as a math teacher as well, and continuing as a track coach in the town of Weston. But you've certainly seen a lot. Tell us a little bit about, just so the audience knows a little bit about you, where did you originate and how did you get involved in Weston?
Well, I was born in New York, grew up in the kind of Queens border near the city line. I went to college at Boston College, which brought me to the greater Boston area in the first place. And then shortly after graduation, I was in grad school and working a couple nights a week, cleaning floors overnight to kind of, make ends meet. And a friend of mine by the name of Mark Young, who I had encountered through running. He was a great runner at Yale, and he would come train with us when I was running at Boston College. I just ran into him at a cross country meet, and he said, "Hey, are you interested in coaching?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I haven't thought about it." I said, "I need an assistant coach." This was only a couple of weeks before the start of the indoor season. My assistant coach left. I have nobody. Do you want to coach? And I thought, well, maybe. How much does it pay? And then he told me, and I sort of figured out how many nights of cleaning floors that would take the place. I thought, that sounds pretty good. I think maybe I will. And really, then that sort of odd, serendipitous way it started.
And when you got involved in Weston, you were working under the mentorship of the well-known coach back then, very successful with an excellent record, the late Don Duncan, who got you involved, to actively involved. I believe it was the women's team. Is that correct?
Yeah, and when I first started with Mark Young, that was in the indoor season, and Don was the head coach of the cross country and spring teams. And in my second year, my first year, there were no openings at Weston for the spring, but in my second year, there was an opening for the women's team, and Don had suggested that maybe I would want to do that and work with him in the spring, which of course I did. And so then I came in and in theory was the women's coach, but we did a lot of things together. Both teams, Don would work with a lot of the female athletes. I would help with the male athletes. It was really more one big combined team when you came right down to it.
And now fast forward a little bit, how you got involved into the more active coaching role and then later on becoming a math teacher.
Well, I really enjoyed the coaching, and I continued doing it through graduate school, and I worked for a while in a consulting firm. And then I was doing some college teaching as, some sort of adjunct / fill-in for various people who might be on sabbatical or whatever. And I realized how much I was enjoying the teaching, plus I was enjoying the coaching and being around the high school kids. And it seemed like a kind of a natural fit. It seemed like what I realized at some point. I realized this is what I really should be doing. And then it turned out when there was an opening for a statistics teacher, which was what I was teaching in college, it was an ideal fit. So that happened in the early to mid 90s, and then here we are today, still doing the same thing.
Now, what you have seen in the town of Weston, and also people in the surrounding communities, because certainly in the track environment, you're competing against other towns, and so what have you? We'll start off with the general conversation.
Okay.
what are the differences in terms of the youth, in terms of how they perceive the world and the world around them from the late 1970s when I first met you to today? What do you see as the big difference? When you're sort of sitting back, you're sort of looking at from afar, and you're seeing the world evolve, if you will. What have you noticed?
There is a much greater concern with what's happening right after high school. What kind of college am I getting into? Where am I going? What's my career path? There's less confidence in, I think, what can happen. And there's also less willingness among lots of kids to just say, well, I'm going to do some things and, we'll see how it goes. And maybe I'll try something else. I'll try this. I'll try that. There's definitely a higher level of anxiety about things like grades and getting into college and so on and so forth than there was, 30, 35 years ago. I mean, there can, there's lots of reasons for that, but it's definitely there. The community's changed a little bit too. It's a wealthy community. It's always been somewhat wealthy, but it's a higher concentration of very wealthy people than it used to have. And it also, we're starting to have a growing Asian community in the town. And children in both of those families tend to be very focused on how good of a college am I going to get into and what am I going to do next? Where I think, late 70s, early 80s, students were maybe a little more in the moment, if you will. Those concerns are out there. I want to go to college. I want to do something after it, but it wasn't as big of a focus as it is now. There was much more willingness to be a kid for a while and, just kind of discover things as we go along, not necessarily thinking you had to know what was next. I think that's been a big difference.
Do you think technology played a role? And this is the example that we talked about when we got reacquainted a few weeks ago. When I was finished with my track practice, I would have the dime. I would put it in the payphone, and then my mother would come in her car and pick me up. But today, children, or the youth, I should say, have the smartphone. Yeah. And not only can they call someone for a ride, but they can see the news of today. For example, the election, the Hillary, Donald Trump election, and see how that affects their future. Do you think the concern of what they're going to do next might be the information overload?
I think that's part of it. And I think part of it is we're exposed to so much more now. Let's take track as a simple example we're talking about. I know when you were running and I was coaching, we knew who the other good kids in the dual county league were, but we didn't really know very much about anything else that was going on around the state. Maybe there was a good kid up in, Western Mass or down at the Cape or something, but we wouldn't really find that out until we actually saw that kid run at the state meet. Now, the websites and the coverage they have, our kids on our team know who every good kid is all over the state, all over New England. And indeed, they know who the best kids in the country are. And it kind of sets a higher bar in a way. It used to be, hey, it's great. I'm the best kid in the league, fantastic. Life is good, Now it's, well, yeah, but I'm only like the 73rd best kid in the state. Or New England or something like that. So the bar is always being raised because we're aware of a wider area and a wider set of athletes. And I think that's true in the, in the world generally. When I grew up in New York, the successful guy was the doctor who lived a few blocks away, who had a little bit bigger house than everyone. And maybe there was a rumor he had a boat somewhere, and now, of course, there are houses that are, 5, 6, 10,000 square feet, and everybody sees them. And you look at, the TV shows and you see that, the great estates all around the country and Home and Garden TV showing you these unbelievable places all over. And I think people's in some sense, the comparison group has changed. We're not comparing ourselves with a local group anymore. We're comparing ourselves with a national or worldwide group sometimes. And I think kids see that, and being in the top 20% of your class used to be a big deal. And now it's, it's only if I get into, Harvard or MIT or someplace, that's a big deal, and that's a much smaller group than the top 20% of your class. So in some ways, those standards have changed because of what we can see, what we're aware of. When I was growing up, I really wasn't aware of too much outside, sort of my local area, my school, my neighborhood, some stuff in New York, but I didn't know what happened anywhere other than New York, pretty much. But kids now know what's happening all over the world.
I would say that for myself, in the 60s and 70s, my father tried to influence the world of what was happening around the world. He is much older than I was, and he fought in World War II. So obviously he was in an arena that was worldwide based. But back then it had no relevance. But now as I mentor youth, as I talk to youth, I talk about the importance of knowing what's around the world. But now we have the resources, as you had mentioned, the websites. It can be social media. It could be the apps on the mobile devices. And so now what's happening is that if an adult such as us mentor a youth and explain the importance of knowing what's around, they now have resources.
Yes, they do.
Back in my day, I was very good at the Dewey Decimal System and knew how to use the card catalog at Weston High School. That was my world. It was whatever was in that library inside the high school. Yeah. But that's different now. We don't use that. Let's now talk about, what have you seen stay the same? What has stayed the same over the years?
Well, students are still awkward, if you will, and sort of developing their social skills and relating to other people, and you can see the maturity develop through the 4 years of high school as students learn how to relate to adults as well as how to relate to their peers. I think that there's a certain aspects of the development process that haven't really changed. In some ways, maybe intellectually they're aware of a lot more things and they've been exposed to more things at an early age, but they still have to figure out themselves how to function in a society, even the sort of restricted society of high school. The ninth graders still come in September and they're pretty lost. That hasn't changed. It was a funny story last spring. We had a meet we've now started to have some twilight meets in the springtime. I actually host one at Regis College in Weston, and there's another one down on the South Shore that we go to. So they start at maybe 5 o'clock on a Saturday, and go to 8 or 9 at night. And we had a meet that we were going to bring some kids to, but it turned out there was the freshman semi-formal dance was that night. And so I was talking about it about a week in advance. I said, these X, Y, and Z athletes are going to go, but they have some freshman events, but our freshmen, we're not going to bring our freshmen because we know you guys have the semi-formal dance. And freshman boys are like, can we go to the meet? Can we go to the meet? We do anything to get out of this dance. We don't want to go to this dance. We'd rather tell our parents we have to go to the meet. And I said, some things about freshman boys haven't changed. That's not any different than it used to be. So that was kind of funny.
So you talk about that the similarity is just the nature of their development stage. Yeah. And then that the difference is the information that's available to them through the technology. Sure. In what way has that created a conflict? If a person is lost, but they're now lost in a bigger world as they're developing.
I think that's an issue. I also think the issue is that people are very good at creating an image on social media for themselves. So students, looking at other people's Facebook accounts or following their Instagram or whatever, might think that they're the only ones who are lost. Everybody else looks like they're doing great, because they create this image through social media, which appears to be, I'm having fun, I'm having success, I've got all these friends and so on. And, in many cases, that's pretty misleading. They're just, finding their way just like everybody else is. But I think sometimes it hurt students' confidence. They think maybe I'm the only one. All my friends and all people I like are doing great, and I'm the only one who's awkward or lonely or unhappy or whatever it happens to be. I think that's a piece of it. It also has certainly created more opportunities for, what's commonly called bullying or other methods of harassment. We've been talking about that a lot at the high school recently. We've got an initiative, to work on students' resilience to bullying and try to reduce it. And the students now say that almost every incident that they're subject to is some form of online or social media, that there's almost no sort of in-person bullying as there might have been in the old days. It's all gone into the electronic world, which is, a development. I'm not really sure exactly what to make of it, but it's something that the students are really pretty aware of.
One of the things that I've observed, I mentioned before we went on air a few weeks ago that I was on an 11-year speaking tour, and one of the places I would go would be not far from Weston, which was in Newton, and I would spend time at their community education program at night. And when I would drive into town and I park my car, and as I'm walking into the brand new Newton North High School, I would be walking in and I would see the high schoolers there, and some thoughts in my mind would be, I remember that. And what I remember was talking with your friends, just something simple, just talking with your friends. But then I also saw that they were also holding their cell phones and they were on WhatsApp or whatever it may, Facebook or whatever it may be, talking with other friends.
Right.
And so that the number of friends, I mean, you mentioned about the bullying issues, the potential opportunity to connect with other people, be it acquaintances or friends, is so much greater. And let me put it into perspective. When I graduated from high school in 1982, it was raining, and the number of people that my graduating class, it was 197 people. We knew each other, but that was our world. That was our Facebook. Today, the number of people that you can connect to is so much greater. And so the world that the youth live in, because of the digital technology that we're talking about, and it just puts people in a different world than what we had in the past. It was fixed and finite. And maybe that's why we didn't focus on the world. It's just that when you communicate with other people, you get other ideas, other opinions, and other yada, 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 whatever it may be, because you connect to. And so earlier we spoke about the information overload. Can we also get information overload from our acquaintances, our peers, or our friends?
Yeah, I would think so. As you say, with a much larger circle. Although sometimes I think that maybe with a larger circle, part of what's lost is the depth of the contact. You had a class of 197, but there were some people in that class who you were quite close to. And I sometimes wonder if some of that gets lost and gets dispersed among a large group of people who you have sort of a shallow contact with. And
that being said, then the social development skills perhaps are different now.
Right.
Because the ability to make a closer connection in terms of that trust, right, and that reliance may be different as well. Have you observed that?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there's a little bit of it. I think that sometimes it seems to me like in some of the older groups, 15, 20, 25 years ago, that maybe there was a little more unity or connection among the class, like the senior class itself, than maybe there is now. That it's a little more dispersed. But that's relying on your memory, which sometimes might sugarcoat the past a little bit. We're all subject to that sometimes. But I think it's a possibility. I think it's definitely a possibility.
Now, you've been a math teacher for many years at Weston High School. How many years has it been about?
24.
So you've been to a graduation or two.
Yes, I have.
And so you've, as an adult, we were talking about relationships, certainly as freshmen come in lost and then develop and get ready to go to college in their senior year. You get to know people over a 4-year period, which is a pretty good chunk of time. So I'm imagining that you probably have missed a lot of people who have graduated. You perhaps have been at the graduation.
Yep.
And many times you've had to say goodbye.
Yes, indeed. That's absolutely true.
And so when you see that, and it's that last moment you're going to see that person, what's the message in general? The reason why I'm bringing it up, what's the message you want to give the youth today?
I think usually what the message I want to give them is, that I'm proud of what they've done and how far they've come. And I see, really positive things for them ahead. And I'm be interested to find out someday where they went, where that path is going to lead them. Because when you see someone over those 4 years from, 14 to 18, they really change a lot, as you know. I mean, the development is really dramatic. And, for the most part, it's a very positive thing for most of those students. And you want them to know that you're proud of them. You're proud of how far they've come and what they've done. And you're optimistic about what's coming next. Because there are a lot of really talented kids who come out of Weston High School. And of course, of many high schools. We're not singling out Weston, but that's where I work. Lots of talented kids who come out, and you're really eager to see what they can do and where they can go and how they can change the world as time goes on. And it's nice, talking about social media and Facebook, now with the growth of that, I'm at least in some touch with a lot more people who I've coached and taught than I would have been otherwise. I think the primary purpose of my Facebook account is to be Weston High School Alumni Association. So I get to really see where a lot of people are and what a lot of people have done, and it's quite nice to see. Quite fun.
My guest today has been John Monz. He is a coach at Weston High School, and he's also a math teacher at Weston High School. Many years ago, he was the assistant coach at Weston High School, in which I was a high school student and a runner. So that's how we know each other. And recently we became reacquainted using the technology that we have been talking about today. John, I want to thank you for joining me on Your World Discovered.
Well, thanks for having me, David. I've enjoyed it.
This is Your World Discovered. My name is David Ewen, and this is E.P.N.